Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
You probably know the feeling. Sweaty, fast breathing, quick heart rate. That's a cortisol spike. It feels awful, and its imbalance is the cause of your anxiety. Rebalance Health's 3-part anxiety system helps address it at the root. Rebalance Health lozenges are natural and designed for optimal absorption, providing 24-hour relief. Live life fully without feeling like you're fighting for it. Get 50% off your first month with code CALM23 at rebalancehealth.com.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey guys, how's it going? I'm your host, Elena Grace, and you're listening to another episode of I've Been Thinking. Okay, so y'all, I'm not gonna lie, I dropped the ball a little bit on planning something for Black History Month. It completely slipped my mind. I was like super focused on Valentine's Day for some reason. I think it's because all the pink and red in stores is like super distracting to my brain. It gives me like excessive amounts of serotonin. And then I didn't end up even really doing a Valentine's Day episode. So anyway, but thank God for my dear friend and sister, Katie Harris. Shout out to you, Katie. With her advice, I was able to pull together something really cool. And honestly, I think that it's really perfect for Black History Month. So I wanted to share with you all. There are so many things that we take for granted in our everyday lives, right? Just these incredible inventions that make modern life so super easy, you know? So for Black History Month, Katie had the idea that I should cover Black inventors, whose names a lot of the time we don't know. A lot of the time we don't know at all who invented frickin' scissors, or the nail file, or the charge pad for your phone. Like, we don't know those things. So for our Black History Month episode, I am highlighting and like telling you the stories of some incredible Black inventors that you might not have heard of. Honestly, you probably haven't heard of. And we all know that George Washington Carver invented the peanut, but I'm confused about that. But who else is there? So, and we know that there's plenty, but we don't know their names because we're just not taught them. So I've got you covered. I'm going to tell you about some of the most influential Black inventors that you may not have ever heard of. So I'm going to tell you about their lives, like what we know about their lives, their accomplishments, and how they have affected the world as we know it today. I'm really excited about this, guys. Plus, we bought new coffee, and it's super dark roast, and it's from Rhonda, and it's as soon as you take a sip, it's like you're on cocaine. So I am here. I am into it. All right. Let's go. So first up, Alexander Miles was born in Ooh, wow. Okay. Alexander Miles was born in Circleville. That is hard to say out loud. Ohio in May of 1838. And obviously, he grew up to become an inventor. He is best known for patenting his design for improving the automatic open and close elevator doors that we use today. And he did that in 1887, which is pretty dope. So he was inspired when he was on an elevator with his little tiny daughter. And he was like, hold up. They forgot to close the inside door. This is super dangerous. We're exposed to the elevator shaft. Like, we could frickin' fall down. So his idea drastically improved the safety of elevators because people were now protected from the shaft. And his design, like his invention, made electric elevator doors widely accepted around the world. And the influence of his patent is still present in modern automatic elevator design, which is insane. That something from 1887 is still prevalent in designs today. I think that's so cool. And elevator design is honestly something I've never thought much about. I guess that there's the cages, like the cage elevators and old hotels and stuff, and then there's just nice elevators, like the all glass ones, and I've never thought about the in between, but this is so cool to know the story behind it. And it's really sweet too that he was inspired by his little girl. So, in addition to being an inspired and innovative inventor, Miles was also known as a businessman in his community. He used the earnings from his barber shop in the St. Louis Hotel, and he was able to purchase a real estate office. So he's climbing the ladder. And that real estate office made Miles the first Black member of the Duluth, Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. So cool. And then in 1884, he had a 3-story brownstone building built in Duluth. He didn't buy it, he had it built in Duluth, Minnesota. And the area around it became known as Miles Block. In 1899, he and his family relocated to Chicago, Illinois, where he founded a life insurance company which primarily sold to Black patrons who couldn't get coverage from many white life insurance firms. Something I've never thought about, but makes so much sense. Never had to think about that, But that's so cool that he took that opportunity to serve his community like that. And then lastly, the family moved to Seattle, Washington. And at the time of his death in 1918, Alexander Miles was known as the wealthiest African American in the Pacific Northwest. That is just such an incredible story, I think. He knew what he was doing, and he lived his life, and he made a good life for himself and his family. Admirable. All right, so next up on the list, Frederick McKinley Jones was born right down the street from me in Cincinnati, Ohio, in May of 1893 to a white father and a Black mother. His mother actually left them when he was a little boy, and his father tried but struggled to raise him as a single dad, which, I don't blame him. It's hard to be a single parent. So at age 7, his dad sent Frederick off to live with a priest in Kentucky. And about 2 years after that, his father died. So at age 11, Frederick ran away back to Cincinnati to find work. And it was at this point that he realized he had a knack for mechanics. Okay. And he didn't just, he worked in mechanic shops, which is an awesome way to figure it out. But he would go home from work and he would study mechanics in his free time, in addition to working daily as a mechanic in a shop. He would go home and read about it. So he was in it. And so he was in the Army in World War I, and he often made repairs to equipment during his service. And that kind of contributed to well, of course it contributed to his learning. I don't know why I said kind of. And so back at home, finally, he was able to learn electronics. And so he makes a few handy inventions, and then, which, like, I'm just going to invent a few things real quick, super casual. And he gets hired to improve sound equipment for the film industry. Insane. So during the 1930s, he ends up designing and patenting an air cooling unit for trucks, aka he invented refrigerated trucks, okay? And so he partners up with the businessman that he had been working with on sound equipment for the film industry. And together they found the US Thermo Control Company. And this was like incredibly valuable during World War One because, and this is like going back to during World War Two, because going back to his service in World War One, he, worked on lots of trucks. He saw tons of things. So in World War Two, refrigerated trucks were used to preserve food, medicine, and super importantly, blood that was needed at hospitals and on the front lines. So Jones had seen like all of these things that were needed during war, and he was able to fill that hole. And he received, so this is really cool to me too. He received more than 60 patents over the course of his career. I feel like I have to super enunciate patents. I don't know. I don't say the T very well. It's part of my accent, I think. Anyway, more than 60 patents over the course of his career, mostly related to his refrigeration technologies, but also related to sound equipment, engines, and x-ray machines. Like, where did that come from, pal? What the crap? So Jones was recognized for his contributions during his life and after, which I always love when somebody is recognized during their life, especially because it was rare at that point in time for a Black man to get that kind of recognition. So he was the first Black man elected to the American Society of Refrigeration Engineers in 1944. Incredible, so cool. And then posthumously in 1991, he was awarded the National Medal of Technology by President George H.W. Bush, making him the first Black man to receive the award, the first African American at all to receive the award, even though unfortunately he was not alive to receive it. But again, he made so many massive contributions and just did such cool stuff. I think that is really awesome, and I'm really glad that he did get recognized during his lifetime. Okay, next up, Alice H. Parker. So very little is known about her life, like very little. But what we do know is that she was born in 1895. She grew up in Morristown, New Jersey, and she attended high school classes at the Howard University Academy in Washington, D.C. Next thing we know, Alice is filing for a patent in December 1919 for her heating system invention, which drew cool air into a furnace, which was then heated, and warm air was delivered through ducts to individual rooms of a house. Sound familiar? The concept of central heating and air actually existed before her birth in 1895, which, like, mind-blowing to think about that. But Alice's design, well, the concept of central heating, not like cool air, but anyway. But Alice's design was unique because it used natural gas rather than coal or wood, which conserved energy. she literally paved the way for the central heating that we have in our homes today, which is wild. So, supposedly, she was inspired to invent this because she was like, I live in New Jersey. It's freaking cold during the winter, and my fireplace isn't effective enough in warming my entire home. Plus, when you have a fireplace or even the heating system that is fueled by wood or coal, you have to go outside and chop wood, or you have to go outside to get your coal out of the shed or whatever. I remember even when I was a little girl, like a little bitty tiny girl, my grandparents' old house, they had like a coal burning like fire heater in the house, and we would have to go outside and get coal out of the garage, like the shed garage thing with my mama. Um, but you wouldn't have to do that. Like in the cold winter, you didn't have to go outside and chop wood or anything. And it decreased the risk of fire because you didn't have to leave a fireplace burning all night long, you know? But kind of most importantly, I want to highlight how insane it was, like how groundbreaking it was that she received a patent. A patent. I can't decide. A black woman in the early 20th century received a patent. This literally preceded the civil rights movement and the women's liberation movement. That was so rare, and it is just outstanding that she was able to achieve that. I'm so proud for her. And I love knowing that she contributed so heavily to this thing that we just take for granted every day in our lives, you know? I mean, my central heat is on right now because it's freaking there's 8 inches of snow outside and I'm cold. And that is because of Alice H. Parker. Like, I love knowing that she gave us that, you know? Oh, really cool. So, next, we have Philip Bell Downing. He was born in Providence, Rhode Island in March of 1857. And unlike some of the other inventors on our list, and like most of them, in fact, Downing actually came from a very prominent family in Rhode Island. His father was a well known abolitionist and businessman, and his mother came from an established New York City family that dated all the way back to the mid 1600s. Downing's grandfather had been born to emancipated parents in Virginia, and he was also a successful businessman in Manhattan, as well as playing an important role in the anti slavery movement. So he was set up for success a little bit more from the beginning compared to some of these other people. That makes no, like, his achievements were still pretty cool, okay? So he receives a patent for improving railway switches in 1890, which was like a huge improvement, apparently. I don't know much about railway switches. I don't know a whole lot about the railroad in general, but apparently it was a huge improvement in quality. Very helpful. And then in 1891, 1 year later, he got approved for 2 patents for a street letter box. The first version of our now ubiquitous tall blue metal box with a hinged door for letters. Until this point, you had to go to the post office to send a letter. So this concept that he created allowed for convenience, like you could have a letterbox on your street and you don't have to ride your freaking horse all the way to the post office, you know. Security, you can't just reach in there and grab something out, as well as protection from the elements. It's got that hinged door, it's covered, so like rain and snow and stuff can't get in there. Then, in 1917, apparently still inspired by mail, he actually received a patent for an envelope moistener, which is very interesting. And then in 1918, he patented an easily accessible desktop notepad. And, these are all things that just make life easier. You don't really think about them, but they just make life so much easier, really, in really interesting ways. I don't know. Okay, last on our list, and my favorite, just because I'm biased, because he is a homegrown Kentucky boy, okay, and he is actually a huge deal in Lexington. We have a school named after him there. Garrett Morgan. He was born in Paris, Kentucky in March of 1877. He was the seventh son of Elizabeth Reed, a woman of Native and African descent, and his father was a former enslaved person. He was freed in 1863 and was the son of the Confederate Colonel John Hunt Morgan. So we know there's some no bueno stuff going on there. That's really unfortunate, actually, like really sad. But in Morgan's teenage years, he moved up to Cincinnati for work, really common, and he was able to work enough to pay for a private tutor to build upon his elementary school education. He really valued education, which is fitting because there's a school named after him. Cool. So he started to get jobs at sewing machine factories. And this is where he learned about his fascination with machinery. He received a patent for an improved sewing machine around this time. And from that, he was able to open his own repair business. And it was such a success that he and his family that he now had, like his wife and everything, were able to establish themselves in Cleveland, Ohio. So, funny enough, his success with sewing machines led he and his wife to open a tailoring shop, because his wife also had some experience as a seamstress and then sewing machines, blah, blah, blah. But Morgan found that it was a very common problem that fabric would get scorched by the friction of the sewing machine needle running too fast, which I've never in my whole entire life thought about that. And I've been around sewing machines my entire life. Two of my grandmothers, I have three because I have a step grandmother, but she's still my grandmother. Anyway, two of my grandmothers were professional seamstresses for a really long time. And so I've never in my life thought about the friction of the needle being a problem, but it makes so much sense when I think about it in this context. So he starts thinking about this friction running too fast. So he starts experimenting with a chemical solution to put on the fabric to try to reduce the friction. But he inadvertently discovered a cream that could be used to smooth hair. So he ends up marketing this primarily to the African American community there in Ohio and then in general. And this allowed him the financial security he needed to continue pursuing just inventing full time, which is the dream. That is so awesome. So in 1914, he patented a safety hood, quote unquote, breathing device, which he marketed to fire departments especially. And this patent actually became the prototype for the gas masks that were used during World War I. And it earned him first prize at the Second International Exposition of Safety and Sanitation in New York City, which is a very niche event. But that is so cool that it got him first prize, first of all, but that his breathing device served as the prototype for gas masks that like we envision in our brains now. Like that's so awesome that he had that kind of um effect, that kind of influence. So in the South, where racial tensions remained still very high in spite of advancements in rights for Black people, Morgan hired a white actor to pose as the inventor during presentations of his breathing device, and he would pose as the Native American sidekick, right? And so this was super successful, apparently, and he sold tons and tons and tons of his breathing devices because of this, because they believed that it was a white man and a Native man. It's just, I mean, it's awful that he had to do this, but it's also kind of hilarious because it's like really resourceful to make your money and also pull the wool over the white man. You know what I'm saying? Like pull the wool over his eyes. So, in a super wild turn of events, though, there's this massive explosion in a tunnel under Lake Erie, which is like in Cleveland, kind of. Well, Cleveland's at Lake Erie. Anyway, there's super massive explosion in a tunnel, and like a bunch of workers were trapped inside the tunnel, like with the noxious fumes and all that stuff. So Morgan and his brother are like, we gotta go help. They throw on their safety hoods and they got inside that tunnel and they brought out 2 survivors and were able to recover 4 dead bodies before the authorities were like, no, no, no mas, no more of this. So this heroism actually hurt his sales, though, because the news was out that the inventor of the safety hood, the breathing hood, was Black. Plus, to throw salt on the wound, he and his brother were never even fully recognized for their efforts to save lives. Like, in some sources, they cited 2 totally different people. Probably because they were like, no, can't have a Black man saving lives. It makes the Black man look too good. We gotta make up something else, Sad. This didn't stop him, though. Like, nothing could stop that man. And he just continued inventing. So, Morgan was the first Black man in Cleveland, Ohio, to own a car. And he developed a friction drive clutch for it, which I don't really know what that means. I don't know anything about automatic cars, but apparently that was important. But probably his best known invention came in 1923. Are you ready? When he created a traffic signal with a warning light to alert drivers that they needed to stop soon. This is the rudimentary version of the traffic light that we know today. That is so crazy that the traffic light was invented in Ohio, because Ohio is literally notorious for having awful drivers. So, the biggest irony I can imagine. That's so funny. Before his death in 1963, I wasn't laughing at his death, I was laughing at myself. Before Morgan's death in 1963, he was actually honored by the United States government for his traffic signal invention, and he was recognized as a hero of the Lake Erie explosion. That's awesome that he did end up getting recognition before his death. I'm really happy about that. Like, really happy. I think that when people aren't given, I think that recognition where it is due is so important. Yeah, so Garrett Morgan was also a huge supporter of the Black community throughout his life, of course, and he was active in associations formed for improving the lives of colored people. He donated to Black colleges, he launched a Black newspaper, and he even opened a Black country club. Like, this man kept busy. But again, he lived his life, and he lived his life to help others and to improve the life of his family, which I just think absolutely incredible. Like, what a hell of a story, you know? Well, guys, I really hope that you have enjoyed these stories of Black inventors. I hope that it has warmed your heart a little bit. I hope that it has made you appreciate some of the things that we take advantage of every day, like central heat and air, mailboxes, traffic lights, um, but railway switches. No, I guess we kind of do take advantage of those because, like, we don't even know they're happening. I don't know. Anyway, but I hope that this has also kind of brought to light, in a way, the effect that Black inventors have had on our society as a whole, and just Black people in general have had on our society as a whole. And we're not taught that so often. We're only taught this one part of history. And there's so much left out, not just about Black people, about Natives, about Europeans who don't fit the narrative that the history books want us out, about Asian, everything. There's this one narrative that we're fed, and I think it's so important to step outside of it. And, that's part of why I started this podcast too, is to help people start thinking outside of that one narrative, because that's so important to expanding your mind and also to understanding what the world really is, and appreciating what the world really is and what it has to offer. Okay, guys, well, before I go on a rant, I love you. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening, and make sure you go, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars and a beaming review, please. Make sure you send the podcast. Like, please refer us to a friend. I would appreciate that so much, because that is the number one way that we're going to grow, is if you start referring us to your friends. So please, I challenge you to send us to one friend this week. Follow us on Instagram at I've Been Thinking Pod. Think about subscribing to the Patreon. The link to that is in the Instagram bio, or you can find the link as well on our website, I'veBeenThinkingPod.com. If you subscribe even for $5, you get a free sticker in the mail, maybe 2. I don't know. We'll see how froggy I'm feeling when I start sending those out. But subscribe for even just the $5 one, you get early episodes, get extra episodes sometimes, and a sticker to put on your stuff. So that's pretty cool. All right, guys, thank you again so much for listening, and I'll talk at y'all next week. Bye.
Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.